And Delegate Queen has joined us.
Okay. We're live now, Kim. Bob.
We're live now, yes.
Okay. All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, I'm Delegate Ben Brooks. I want to welcome you to the Public Utilities Subcommittee. We have 5 bills in front of us today, and we will go ahead and get started. Council, you want to go ahead? Let's start with HB 561.
House Bill 561 from Delegate Davis, as introduced, alters the renewable energy portfolio standard by authorizing the use of methane for thermal purposes as an RPS in Tier 1, as well as wastewater used for as a heat sink. There are amendments from Delegate Davis. If you'd like, I will share those on the screen if I can figure out how to do that.
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, give me a sec on that. Here we go. And I need to share that. It's not the one that I want. Okay. I apologize. I'm just
Oh, that's okay.
Too many at the moment. Let me just do this here. I'm going to share the agenda for the moment. That will work. While what we're doing, the amendment from the chairman would actually strike all changes to the methane and instead would require that for the raw or treated wastewater used as a heat source or sink for a heating or cooling system, which becomes 7-701S13, part of the Tier 1 sources, it would say that that energy is eligible for inclusion in meeting the RPS only if the source is connected with the electric grid serving Maryland or processes wastewater from Maryland residents. So that would allow anything obviously in-state, or I know that there's a facility down at Blue Plains in DC that does process Maryland waste. They also would be able to have RECs generated from their heat sink. Let me see if I can, again, get a few other things out of my way, and maybe I can share the reprint on screen. I've just got too many windows open. That's the problem. And try a new share, see if that will let me. Here we go. Okay, you can see that. Right. That works.
That works.
So in the bill as introduced, would have had 2 different changes to the RPS Tier 1. It would have said that essentially certain methane that was used to generate electricity or thermal energy or mechanical energy, we're taking that away. So methane stays the way it is in the current RPS. And then we have the raw or treated wastewater used as a heat source or sink for a heating or cooling system. That's what's in the bill as drafted. But what we've done now is in 7704A, which is what has the scope of where all of these things can be used and are eligible. We qualify that by saying that kind of wastewater source can only be included in Maryland's RPS if it's either attached to our electric grid or it processes wastewater from Maryland residents.
Okay.
So that's different from the amendment that was shared that was dealt with last week.
All right.
More limited.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions? If not, can I get a motion?
Move favorable.
A second.
Can I get a second? Okay.
Sorry,
Okay.
I was muted.
This is on the amendment. Okay.
Okay. Delegate Motz has his hand up, I believe.
Okay. Delegate Motz, go ahead.
I apologize. I was having trouble getting on the link. I'm on now, and I know where you are, so I'm good. No
Okay,
question.
all right. Okay, this is on the amendment. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, on the bill,
On the bill is amended.
can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and second for favorable on the bill as amended. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, and opposed? Okay, that the motion carries.
Okay, so that's House 561.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Next one down is from Delegate Buckle, the RPS thermal biomass systems. I believe I had a communication today from Deputy Secretary McKittrick at DNR, and he's actually on the line. If you want to hear what they have to say on the bill.
yeah, yes, please.
Thanks for the promotion, Bob. I appreciate that very much. James McKittrick, Legislative Director for the Department of Natural Resources. You know, I don't want to prolong the conversation within the subcommittee. You know, we've obviously made that we need to make. I'd just like to note that there are some discussions going on right now with some subcommittee members about steps moving forward. But I'll just leave it there if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right, that'll be fine.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Should I just raise my hand? Mr. McKittrick, we spoke briefly last subcommittee hearing, and I just wanted you update the subcommittee on what is the impact of this program. We talked about the economics of it. I mean, Western Maryland, obviously they do forest management. Obviously there are byproducts. I mean, what are we talking about here? What's the benefit? Because that's really what this comes down to is, this is a creative way, to kind of move forward with an industry that's already there. There's already forest management. There's already a byproduct. And that's what I was hoping maybe you could very just briefly and succinctly just kind of update us on that.
Yeah, so unfortunately took us a little bit longer to pull those figures you'd asked for. So, I apologize we don't have them today. But, the orders of magnitude that we're talking about is absolutely significant. We kind of talked ad nauseum too. You're absolutely, dead on. We have plenty of waste out across the entirety of the state for a number of reasons. And rather than just letting that become waste, there's obviously a fantastic opportunity to reuse that in order to mitigate the use of fossil fuels.
So just to recap, forest management is happening all over the state already. It's creating waste, and we have an opportunity here to supplement fossil fuels to create energy, and that's what this bill is about.
Correct. I would add that, forest management is not something that this committee or subcommittee hears about. I would dare to say ever in its day-to-day operations. But forest management is absolutely key for us meeting our climate change goals. Without healthy forests, which is what is achieved through forest management, our greatest carbon sink, would really be in trouble.
Thank you.
All right, does anyone else want to make a comment or about the bill?
Mr. Chair, I had my hand up.
Okay, go ahead. For some reason, Bob, I can't see any of the, you're gonna have to identify the folks. Delegate Shakoudian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had spoken to Mr. McKittrick. I appreciate his time, as well as some of the people who have raised concerns, as well as some of the proponents. And we had been talking about a summer study, and I had committed to supporting those efforts. I had a chance to talk to Delegate Motz, and we want to make sure that we're, well, he can speak for himself, but really making sure we have a solid study that addresses the real specific issues of supporting the efforts of healthy forest management, while making sure that anything that we put into the statute would only incentivize the really the harvesting with a life cycle, net zero or close to net zero life cycle analysis for the carbon, and also addressing the localized pollutants that could come out of any of the technology that we are potentially incentivizing. There are really clean models out there, and I think the concerns from the opponents has been that the way that this is written maybe doesn't match those clean models. So I just want to reiterate my willingness to work with GNR and anyone else on sort of working on that over the summer, working with the really good scientists we have at DNR and elsewhere, and supporting, finding the path forward for next year.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Delegate Motz has his hand up.
Delegate Motz?
Thank you, Chairman. And along those lines, what Delegate Charkoudian was referring to, Mr. McKittrick, are the clean models currently in place? Where are there clean models that are in place?
Yeah, I would make the argument, and we have made the argument, that anywhere that there's a thermal biomass, woody biomass system, that's a clean model. You look to the northeastern states, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts. Those are all examples. Canada, our neighbors to the north, have embraced this, as a clean model. But it's, obviously the hope that we can educate this subcommittee and any members who would be willing to join, over the summer, to delve into this and to really take a hard look. I think this session's been particularly hard to be able to look into complex issues. So we just welcome that opportunity, and appreciate Delegate Charkoudian.
Well, so my thing with doing a study is a study's a study, and educating the members of the subcommittee. I want to know if, in fact, we can come up with, or the department or the study can come up with a recommendation on how to put this into law so it can actually take effect. Is that your concept of doing a study? What I don't want to embark on is a fact-finding mission where we discuss things and learn more about this, but we don't have a resolution. This is an ongoing problem. So, as we have an environmental concern about, as there are articulated concerns about implementing this right now, we've got forestry going on, and the forestry that's being done isn't what it should be and what it could be. And in the long term, that has a negative environmental impact. And it's out west, and it's in my district on the shore. And so the time is of the essence. And so I think the idea with a study would be that the experts, rather than the politicians, are scratching out the notes and coming up with the recommendations. And didn't know, with a study, could we expect there to be a proposal, a legislative proposal that could be moved on deliberately next session?
Well, I appreciate that very much, Delegate Motz. I think you hit on some really fantastic points. Especially about, the importance of this issue now and in the future. Obviously the summer study is up to, in the form it takes is up to the discretion of the committee, subcommittee, the chairman. But it would be my hope and my strong suggestion that we do indeed come up with recommendations and a path forward for 2022.
Okay. All right. Are there anybody else have any questions or comments?
I've got another question, Chairman.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
So do we have a draft language for what the study would look like, or is that what we need to put together before we vote?
No, if we're going to go ahead and so we're going to do a study, I guess we could work together on what we want in it. I think if the study, that wouldn't. Well, I guess we could.
May I?
We could make some suggestions. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Just to answer the delegate's question, typically when we do summer studies, because it's technically a negative vote on the bill, technically, nothing's reported to the floor or anything like that. So there is no language for that. Summer study is just like a statement of the committee. And then in this case, Bob will help the subcommittee chair and the committee, sort of work out the goals and objectives, reaching out with the stakeholders about how to move forward. So there isn't any, and that's with any other summer studies, there isn't anything that we put out there and vote on other than the fact that we are going to summer study it. And then we find all the relevant issues, and then we meet up during the summer, which for us, quite frankly, means the fall. I typically don't schedule much over the summer, but we get started in September.
Is it appropriate to ask the department to do a draft bill?
Yeah, I think that's something that a draft bill or language or a working document, if that's what I think you're asking, a working document to look at and evaluate.
Delegates, I'm showing the draft of the bill with Delegate Buckles' current amendment incorporated into the bill. And that would be a starting point, perhaps. The other way that sometimes people have done things is to come up with a formal bit of legislation creating a work group, but then you have the time period for getting the people appointed, and that can actually end up slowing things down. In this case, we'd be sending a letter directing the DNR to work with the PSC and stakeholders and interested persons, perhaps I should say, on developing language to come back to us, report to us at the end of the fall, and have language ready for introduction at the first day. Delegate Howard has his hand up.
Delegate Howard.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Summer study, great. We all know what that means. I just wanted it to be firmly worded in that it would be actually completed. And I was also concerned about the time frame. So my questions were answered.
Okay, thank you. All right, anybody else?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
if I could chime in, I can't say this enough, it is certainly the department's preference to, be as flexible as possible. I mean, we stand ready, in April. Well, maybe that's overpromising, but in May at least, to be able to have our ducks in a row, including with interested parties. So we're ready to get cracking as soon as the committee is ready.
All right. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll get with council and we'll come up with some parameters here, and then we'll see what we can do and get all the stakeholders involved, so we can come up with something concrete that would be able to work for everyone. Okay. So Bob, that would be we'll do a summer study with HB 682. Okay.
Understood.
Okay. All righty. The next bill on the list is HB 1007.
Mm-hmm. See if I can find what that looks like. Okay. And we have the latest set of amendments. This is the semi-latest. This was the latest until we got an email this morning. So
Okay.
this is what we had. Okay. Without some language on Department of Labor. So this is the prior set of amendments. We're talking here about defining legacy geothermal system, which means one that exists as of the end of this year, and post-21 geothermal, anything that would be placed in service on or after January 1st of next year. There is a carve out added, or a band, if you will, for post-21 geothermal starting in 22 as part of the required tier 1 sources in the RPS. That was done through the CJA a couple of years ago. New provision added so that at least 25% of that new geothermal band would have to be derived from post systems that were installed either at single or multifamily units that qualify as lower moderate income housing on the date of installation, or in institutions that primarily serve low and moderate income families and individuals, such as certain schools, hospitals, and other institutions where they're basically tied to federal or state support program, certain federal or state support programs. Then in the application provision, where we have the current geothermal system, there's a new, some new provisions concerning third-party operation of closed loop or open loop systems. And then say that for the post-21 systems with a certain capacity, they have to be done by companies that provide these certain labor benefits. As we continue, they did strike the requirement that the commission adopt regulations to certify installation companies. And then there's a separate system for alternative compliance payment for failure to meet that geothermal band, with certain sums that would then be paid into a separate account within the CEF. As we go further down, within CEF, again, they say the compliant, this is the separate account for the post-21 geothermal ACP payments. They're supposed to be used to make loans and grants to support new geothermal heating and cooling that are owned by or directly benefit low and moderate income residents of the state. Then there's a comprehensive study that is required. This is essentially House Bill 40 and grafted onto the bill. If that, I believe that's correct. If and then the amendment also adds three. Well, actually, it adds. It changes 2 reps of labor to be 2 reps from Baltimore DC Metro Building and Trades, and 1 from the Maryland and State District AFL-CIO, and add 1 additional thing for encouraging that they've the installers have used the apprenticeship requirements under the bill, and it can't affect the current contract. Those are the amendments. As I
and that's all we have for now. We have others we can add if they're needed, but that's all we've got for now.
So you're grafting HB 40 into this bill. You're completely folding that bill into this bill.
That's actually what she said she was going to do at the House Bill 40 hearing. She said she was going to do that when she brought forth the later bill, which turns out to be this one.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Then.
Chairman, is there a fiscal note on this bill? I couldn't find one.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a fiscal note on this bill. The question is what it says.
Hey.
Okay, the note talks about special fund revenues and expenditures for a number of years through PSC. 22 would be $260,400. Again, revenues and expenditures, so it zeroes out. And then roughly in the 70s for the later on from fiscal 2023 on.
Okay.
But that's the fiscal note. I believe we may also have some other people here who have expertise or interest, including people from PSC. Delegate Queen has her hand up.
Okay, Delegate Queen, go ahead.
Well, my question was going to be related to PSC, so maybe we'll hear from them. But I know initially when this bill came in, they were, you know, the only ones I believe, but they were unfavorable. We took out the they don't have to adopt regulations. Does that address all their concerns? I know it was another concern about implementation dates. Did we get that resolved? Is everybody on board with this now?
Right, we'll let PSC come on and they can perhaps give us state their position or their feelings on it. Okay. Is any other legislators hands up, Bob?
I do not see any other legislators with their hands up.
Okay, all right. Okay, and I spoken with the delegate, Delegate Shakudian earlier about the large geothermal system eligibility and some of the things that were in there about a large unit would be considered a unit with 360,000 BTUs. And then there were things in there about things that are already in law. And that was the employer paid workers' compensation and then the unemployment insurance. And those things, they are already codified. So I was wondering what was the need for those in the bill. And I think it was some things that were rolled from CEJA, I was told. So I don't know whether the delegate wants to share with the committee what the thought process was on that.
Yes, sure, Mr. Chair. Thank you for asking. So what we basically did with this bill is we said geothermal is an important piece of the RPS. It's not growing as fast as we need it to. What do we need to grow it? I spoke with the Geothermal Association about that. Then I said to the Geothermal Association, we're really interested in this state in growing our new clean energy with good jobs and with unions as part of the conversation. Would you be willing to have that conversation? Geothermal Association said they would welcome it. So then we brought together the steam fitters who are here with us today, LIUNA, AFL-CIO, and we talked about what would be the things you would need to see in a piece of legislation, any legislation, but this is the one we're working on now, which could be a model for others, so that you would be sure that the jobs that were being created in this new industry were going to be good jobs that would continue a legacy of good jobs for these trades in particular. And what they gave us was this section of the bill, which actually is very similar to what we have in CEJA, in the OREC section of CEJA. And it basically lists all of these areas that you can see. I won't repeat them, but one of the areas that it lists is unemployment insurance and workers' comp. And what the labor unions have told me, and they're here so they could respond if I don't have this right, but what they've told me is that because some of the unscrupulous contractors who they're concerned about, and this is, small minority, but this is the concern, will use the term independent contractors and not actually put people on payroll and do it, paying cash under the table around the laws that we do in fact have in place, to your point, Mr. Chair, that they feel like every time we put in labor language that is establishing what good jobs look like, that it's important to also include that. So even though it's redundant, it's a level of specificity and security and guaranteeing that nothing falls through the cracks. So that's my understanding of it. And as they sort of know this field and challenges within the field better than I do, I would defer to them if I haven't gotten that right.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else comments or concerns about the bill?
Howard's got a
Delegate
question.
Howard has a question.
Go ahead, Delegate.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the unions bringing to the attention the unscrupulous non-union actors. My question is about the compliance cost of this bill and how it will help rural communities. And that's pretty big questions, but I think they're ones that need to be looked at thoroughly. This is a big bill, could be very expensive moving forward. And I, like Delegate Charkoudian, don't want anything to fall through the cracks. So I think we need to look at this further as far as from a compliance issue. Also, how it would help poor people in rural communities as well. I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that, but.
I can, and perhaps.
I think the compliance is going to be a big deal. And I think ultimately the recs several years out as the trajectory of this piece of legislation goes out, could be hugely expensive as well.
Yeah, it's not. We actually did an analysis of that. It'll take me a second to pull that out because we have the alternative.
Have you shared that with the subcommittee or committee?
I'm not, maybe in someone's testimony. You have alternative compliance payment is in the bill itself. So always the alternative compliance payment is the cap on the absolute maximum. If we're not meeting the goals, that's the absolute maximum of what the cost could be. But let me get my hands on.
What other part of the RPS requires organized labor to install, maintain? Delegate, if you want to answer that.
Delegate Howard, can I finish answer? You've asked now 3 questions.
Sure, yeah.
I just want to
Well,
make
as they pop into my brain, I like to put them out there.
So in about 3 minutes, I'm going to try to, you can see here what the alternative compliance payments are. And then I'll get the analysis of what that would mean for an average ratepayer in a second. In terms of your questions about what other parts of the RPS, right now, there's some general labor language in the RPS generally, and then the OREX has a lot more specific labor language. That's in fact where we got this from. That's the offshore wind.
So
component.
nothing specific, okay.
No, it is specific. To get OREX, one has to meet the same requirements that we have here. But I want to actually, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, for Adam Santry, who I think he's the president of the Geothermal Association, and he has an understanding of the deployment of geothermal across the state. And in fact, I think it's potentially being more right now widely deployed in rural areas and has the potential to grow in rural areas. But I'll let him speak to that. If
So
that's
you're
okay.
saying,
Right?
and just very quickly, you're
hold
saying that
quick.
OREX are that OREX are required, or I'm sorry, that labor unions are required in OREX.
Sorry. Well, let me just clarify. Labor unions are not required in this bill, but standards that are tied to labor that I worked with the labor unions to develop are in this bill. Labor unions are not required.
So nowhere else is it required.
Right. Those same standards are required for OREX. Labor unions are not required in either in either set of rec carve-outs.
So or in the RPS in general. Okay.
Correct. So there's general labor standards.
So this would be new. This would be new in that we would be inserting labor into the RPS.
No.
Mandated.
No. The OREC section, the OREC carve out of the RPS has language that mirrors this language here. It's already in the RPS.
It's not required. This is requiring it.
No, it's required. It's the same as this.
The OREC and the OREX, the labor is required.
The labor standards are required.
The labor standards are required.
Nowhere in this bill nor in the OREC bill are labor unions required. But labor standards are required in both of them, and they mirror each other. This mirrors the OREC standards. Does that answer your question about labor?
Half of them.
Okay, we're going to hear. Is that okay, Mr. Chair, if Adam Santry speaks to the rural deployment?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Santry.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak a little bit to the rural impact. As many of you know, rural communities, Delegate Howard, are actually, the most adversely impacted right now by high utility bills because they don't have access to natural gas. Most of these people are on propane and home heating oil, which is your most expensive forms. So, currently we are actually doing a lot of installs in those areas just because of the extremely high burden that heating oil and heating propane can cause on those communities. So
this is all great. This is all great. I want to know how much this is going to cost. And we already know that. I want to know.
I thought that was your question. You said, what would the impact be on rural areas? I thought that was your
right. But I get that, but I don't see bill how. Okay, it talks about hospitals. It talks about low income buildings that serve low income institutions. I don't have those in rural areas. I represent a rural area. I don't have a hospital. I'm not meeting a lot of these criteria. The Eastern Shore in some areas is not going to meet a lot of these criteria. So I want to know two things. How are we mitigating that? And how much this bill costs?
mean, on Howard, number one, you have schools. So, I mean, it seems
We have
like we're really,
schools, but we don't have the
you
other
have-
hospitals. We
you
don't
have-
have
you
the
have
other
schools,
things that
so-
Bill's talking about.
it was a 25% carve out for that. You do have schools. As far as the piece.
I'm not saying I don't
this
have
is-
schools.
Well, somewhat you're mischaracterizing. For example, my company is not a union company. And you keep on saying that it's going to require unions. It doesn't require that in the bill. That's not what the bill says. It's talking about fair sustaining wages. A company like mine and every company in my association, we meet those
Talk about rural
characterizations.
areas, or are we going to revisit this?
Well, what do you want me to? I can answer. You said
Rural
you said you
areas.
wanted rural areas. I gave you the rural
Right.
area example.
And then
right?
you said I don't have schools. I do have schools. What I don't have is other things outlined in this bill, such as hospitals, such as institutions that primarily serve low-income families. That means like buildings up the street right here in Annapolis to help people with safety nets as far as welfare is concerned. I don't have some of those things in my area. So what I want to know is when it comes to the rural areas, like Johnny's area, like my area, the Eastern Shore, what is the means testing to make sure we're going to get our fair share? I don't see it in the bill.
75% of the bill doesn't have anything to do with that requirement. I mean, you're talking about, you're specifically wanting to know, you're worried about the 25% and only the 25%. There's 75%, the majority of that bill, everyone in your community has access to that.
That doesn't mean they're going to get access to it, though. A lot of these pieces of legislation I get concerned about down here because they're specifically crafted to make sure that Montgomery or one of these other districts eats up into this. And I get concerned about that.
It's 75% is available. Anyone in your district, any school, any person could apply for this program.
Apply, and then they have to meet those standards.
There is no standard for 75%. There is no standard. I mean, the only standards apply for the 25%. The 75% of it, which is the vast majority of it, any person in your district could go ahead and apply for it. And to be honest with you, it would benefit them more because of the fact that they have home heating pool, they have more expensive utility bills where your district is. Same thing on the Eastern Shore. They have higher costs on their utility side because they don't have access to the natural gas network. So 75% of the funds for this would be available to all. The exact percentages in your districts that'll meet the low income requirement, but that's 25%. The vast majority of this bill is open, it's open to all. And, I'll repeat again, would be of great benefit.
So, okay, that's fine. What about the cost of this bill as far as compliance is concerned?
Sure. I mean, I think we have the chart we could forward over to you. I mean, well, that's one of the things I think I love about this. Sure, that's one thing I love about this bill. I mean, we're talking about in the first year, you're talking about the projections they're showing right now about 8 cents per month, and that's before you mitigate that with peak demand shaving, which is about a 10% reduction. So I think if you look at that, when this bill was crafted, the ACP compliance is extremely modest compared to anything that's been passed before because of just how effective geothermal is. We're actually going to provide more energy with less funds. So for someone like yourself, I know you have concerns about RPS spending. Well, this is actually a great bill to bring down the total cost to get us to our goal because we're actually making do with less. We can provide more energy savings with less funds to make this a viable technology.
That's great. And I appreciate you saying that, but do we have a fiscal note about this bill and especially the amended bill that talks about compliance costs and that talks about all these savings costs, especially in the out years? No.
Yes, we do have the projections. Yes, we do.
So,
you do,
Mr. Chair?
But legislatively, do we have projections? Do we have that fiscal note?
Okay. All right. Okay. Delegate Howard, we're going to come back to you. Okay. Delegate Charkoudian, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I believe we've shared was just sent to everybody again, sort of the projected cost, the 8 cents per month that Adam just mentioned. Based on the way the ACP is crafted. That's not actually in the fiscal note. The fiscal note writer said they weren't doing that this year just because of the timing, but just because of the overwhelm of this year. But we used his analysis and the way that he does, Stephen Ross from MLIS, the way that he does fiscal notes on RPS bills to develop these numbers that were just sent to everyone on the subcommittee. In terms of the question about peak,
just all over the place. But all right.
If I can,
Delegate
Mr.
Howard, you want to
Chairman.
mute yourself, sir? Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Delegate Fisher's asking to get let in, so if someone could let him into the Zoom.
Okay.
We tried twice.
Sorry, the second half of what I was going to say, I was a little bit confused. The second half of what I was going to say was just that I think that you have received, although we can send it again, the report that shows the peak shaving, which is the benefit to the entire grid that comes from increasing the amount of geothermal on the grid. So it's a direct cost savings to everybody on the grid from peak shaving that comes whether or not you actually have the geothermal in your home. So that's another analysis that Mr. Santry mentioned, and we'll send that out to everybody now as well.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All
I'm
right, sure,
happy to answer
sure.
other questions.
Council, you said, is someone from the PSC on?
We have both Lisa Smith and Ken Mosier
Okay, let's
from the
start.
commission here.
Okay,
If they wish to speak, I mean, they're both
okay,
shown as muted and camera not on, but they're logged in, so.
okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought my camera was on. Can you see me, Bob?
Let me see. Yes, we can
Yes.
now. Mhm.
Okay, great. And you can hear me. Hi, Lisa Smith, for the record, Director of Legislative Affairs for the Maryland Public Service Commission. And this is a very interesting to hear. I'll try to address all the questions, but feel free to ask me if you have additional questions. So this bill, yes, it is true. The PSC expressed concerns and opposed this particular bill, mostly for implementation concerns. As you all well know, we don't typically weigh in and take a position on our PS bills, but there are those certain bills that just have those technical roadblocks where we cannot envision how to get from step A to step B, and there might be legal issues at times, there may be practical issues, resource issues, different things. In this case, I think I do appreciate the efforts of the proponents and the sponsor to work with us over the last few weeks and start talking about the issues. So I think we've learned a lot, and while I do definitely appreciate their willingness to engage with us, we've spent quite a bit of time in the last 2-3 weeks. We were not involved earlier, and I think that may be part of the problem. My colleague on the previous bill from DNR mentioned that this is a difficult session being remote and in the context of COVID to work on complicated issues. And when he said that, it made me think of this bill. I think it's just particularly difficult to kind of dig in and wrap our minds around what this takes. The commission is relying on our technical staff on this one for the most part, since they are the ones that do primarily oversee the RPS program and issue, our findings and results every year to you, the General Assembly, so you can make more decisions. So we are learning a lot about solar, about offshore wind. And I think, our lessons learned in those programs are also informing our feedback to you on this one. One of the things we looked for in particular are data. And, some of you have just mentioned this, is there a case to be made with evidence that this is the right way to incentivize geothermal? If that's the policy goal, is this the right way to do it? Is a carve out needed to incentivize it? And we just, our technical folks just haven't seen that. I'm not saying, it sounds like the sponsor feels that there are other materials and things we could look at. So it's not to say if we don't look at this over the summer, over the interim, if we continue to talk about this, maybe we can work through some of these issues. I know the study that's inserted into this from HB 40 does include a study of whether, what incentives are needed and what are the best incentives. And I think the MEA would be tasked with that. And the study language, I think it's due in this bill, it says it's due by October. So I don't know, would it be helpful if I went into some of the specific concerns? Those are sort of our general big picture concerns, but I don't know, Bob, do folks want to hear about some of our specifics as well? No, Delegate Queen had a question, but I don't want to take up too much of your time.
Yeah, well, go ahead, Lisa, and speak about a couple of specific ones, if you.
Okay, so in terms of the specific implementation issues, one was the labor, wage, and health. The labor section, it was mentioned that this is an offshore wind program. Our technical staff just advised that from a technical perspective, those programs are very different, practically speaking. As you know, offshore wind is a much different kind of like RFP process. We have a consultant that reviews those applications. It's a very much different process. This one would be a little bit more like the existing geothermal without the carve out, and solar, and some of the other ones where they literally come in, on a daily basis. So this is just handled in-house. It's not really in our bailiwick to review decisions about those enumerated things. So we're just a little concerned if someone contests that someone should not have been approved, that's something we'll have to determine, and we're just not really sure how to do that. We're not sure. I mean, maybe there are installation companies out there that do meet these criteria. We just
Hey, excuse me, hold on a second. If you're not talking, would you please mute? Thank you. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yeah, no, we just don't know if they exist or not. Let's see here. And then there's the low income qualification piece. Certainly, it's up to the subcommittee how you want to craft that. I will say that the general language, like the one in there, has become sort of a contested issue at the commission. So that might be something we have to work out. So we just wanted to kind of let you know we had some questions about that. And then finally, and this is kind of a biggie for our technical folks, we've never actually evaluated commercial savings, system savings. So we are learning from the folks. Some of them are on this call. Adam's group, the proponents have generously agreed to meet. We actually have a meeting tomorrow. So hopefully the engineers can all get together and learn more about evaluating system savings and measurement for the REC. But like I said, we're kind of in a learning mode. So I'm sorry I can't be more concrete. This is kind of all the information we have right now, but I hope that's a little bit helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions. And I think Kevin's on as well.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Does anyone have any questions for Lisa?
Am I allowed to ask a question, Delegate Brooks, or no?
Who am I speaking? Who?
This is Adam Santry from the Maryland Geothermal Association.
Okay, yes, go ahead, Adam.
I mean, my only question on this maybe need also a clarification for the group, because this has come up a couple of times, is, the additional workload because the PSC doesn't know how to process a commercial application. And I just wanted to clarify that, the way that commercial application will be processed is the exact same way that it would have been processed when we were moved into Tier 1 10 years ago. So, I mean, as a private citizen and a member of industry here in Maryland, I just find it hard to believe that, 10 years ago we were moved into Tier 1 and they were tasked with figuring out how to calculate a system. But now 10 years later, they're saying, one of the main, impediments to this is the fact that they're worried they haven't had a chance to figure that out yet. So, I just want to point out that the way that a REC will be calculated, this is from 10 years ago. This is not a new issue today that this bill raises. So that it's just a bit of my concern when someone talks about needing more time, and we've had 10 years.
Okay, Adam, thank you. And that's my own side. Really, the question should be coming from the legislators, not from the guests. Okay.
Sure. Chair Brooks, would you like me to address that quickly?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yes, I think it's a great point that the commercial systems are in the law. We're not contesting, and we've been very upfront and clear. We've gone, I think, above and beyond to try to work with Adam and everyone, but it doesn't mean that we've ever done it. So I'm just relaying, our technical staff have never had to do it. There are things that are on the books that if no one has ever applied for this, and that, again, that raises the question, I'm not really sure why no one's applied. These are kind of the things the study would look into, I think. How many geothermal systems are there? Do we need more incentives? What's the right incentive? Because maybe they are out there, as Adam's saying, but no one's ever applied to us for qualification, so we just haven't done it. And I'm not sure it would be responsible use of dollars to work on something, studying something, or figuring out how to do something that we don't have to do. So that would be my response.
All right, thank you. Next, Rick Bonetti, go ahead, Rick. I think your hand has been up a while.
Thank you, Delegate Brooks. So I just want to sort of clarify on the labor, the labor piece. We offered an amendment to sort of take care of that certification piece. And I'll say, just so the subcommittee knows, that with regard to apprenticeship standards and whatever wage standards there are, it's not reinventing the wheel here, right? This is what the Maryland Department of Labor does every day, day in and day out. They've got all the systems in place. They've got all the software in place. And our suggestion through amendment was that the work group would direct those responsibilities over to the Department of Labor. It's not like you're pushing a boulder up the hill. It's not like you're reinventing the wheel here. It's something the state does day in and day out. And in terms of, and regardless of whether or not the PSC wants to do it, if under this bill, if a school is being built, then chances are in most counties that school is going to be already subject to what's called the prevailing wage. And on prevailing wage, you've already got certified payrolls that have to go up from the contractor to the state to make sure that they're paying those rates in any given particular county. You know, those rates vary county by county. And make sure that all those workers are properly classified. We just don't understand what the big deal is with keeping track of how many apprentices are on a job. Most of the contractors doing this work already have that software built in because a lot of them, or have access to that software because a lot of them are already doing state work, so they're already used to it. So we just don't see it as that much of an impediment. So I guess I would want to know, is it the PSC's position that the only thing we can do is strike that language, or because we think that the sponsor and the proponents of the bill have done a lot of work before the committee and outside to make sure that this is a job that ultimately is going to create some good paying jobs in Maryland, regardless of where the project is, the projects are going to be.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mr. Bonetti. I see Vice Chair Dumais. You can unmute yourself.
I did, sorry. I do remember the hearing, and it was rather impressive that it's like one of the first times that I have seen labor and the environmental community together. And if I remember correctly, there was no opposition to the bill, with the exception of the PSC, who suggests that these are things that, are a little different than what they've done before. So we can kick the can down the road and not do anything. But in the meantime, I think we lose jobs. And again, I think it's really important to give consideration to the fact that it's, the environmental supporters and labor have come together. I worked on a different bill trying to get that done this summer, and it didn't work. So a bill with no opposition is getting an awful lot of pushback. So that's my 2 cents.
Delegate Brooks, I have one more point I forgot to make, if you don't mind, quickly.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry. And so just so the subcommittee knows that there's another bill that passed out of your committee and then out of Senate Finance and then subsequently through both chambers that does say that the PSC will have to, going forward, will have to consider labor as they regulate the utility. So it's not like they're not going to have to in the future to do that anyway. So I just wanted to point that out.
Unfortunately, Mr. Bonetti, I think labor came out of that bill, but no, a different one. Okay, sorry.
Language. They still have.
I see. Gotcha. I remember now.
Language, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Madam Vice Chair. Delegate Johnny Montz.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess this question is probably first question is for PSC. So geothermal is already in the RPS, or is it not in the RPS? Lisa?
It's in the RPS.
Right. So we've got schools in our district that have got
mixed messages.
We got a brand new one in East. But we got schools that are already have geothermal. Can they benefit from the RPS recs already?
If I mean, I don't know if they applied, but they potentially could have.
Right. So
But I don't believe they've applied because we haven't received any we haven't received any
right,
applications.
but they already could if they applied. So it already exists, right?
Correct.
Right. And then, so the essence of this bill is the carve out portion. And I guess that's for the sponsor or for any of the experts who are on here.
Delegate Charkoudian?
Sure, I think that's right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, Delegate Mouse, is that the schools already could apply. They haven't because the value of the recs has been too low. So now they would apply. And I think what PSC is saying is even though they've had 10 years to get the commercial side up and running in terms of their program, they haven't had to because the value of the recs has been too low. So no one's applied. So to your point, yeah, they could have applied 9 years ago if they wanted to. They didn't. This would make them more likely to apply, and more likely to apply means that it would be more beneficial to your local schools to put geothermal in. They'd be more likely to put geothermal in. That is the idea.
Yeah, they're all putting geothermal in. So, but I guess this question would be for the association, Adam. Is it, so having a carve out, a dedicated carve out, do any other states have a carve out for geothermal?
Every state's program is a little bit different. So places like New York, they all function a little bit differently, but yes, they have New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, all already have set aside programs for geothermal. They don't have per se the same RPS program that we have because every state manages their energy differently, but they do have a utility driven model in New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts.
I guess going back to the Public Service Commission, Lisa, are you saying that the Public Service Commission could not execute the bill? Execute the various provisions in the bill?
In a nutshell, I think it's very likely we would have to go back and make fixes because there's so many layers of this onion, and we're not, again, we've never said we're opposed to geothermal carve out, but first of all, there's a study in here, so I'm not really sure what happens if the study finds we then need to come back and make fixes in addition. So that's where I think, yeah, I mean, if you pass it, we'll have to work with what we have, but it's very likely there will be issues because again, we don't even know some of these things we haven't worked through, and so we might have to come back and make fixes, particularly if the study finds additional recommendations.
What do you mean by issues? Like people not being able to register or not being able to sell the RECs, or what do you mean by issues?
Well, how to qualify for low income, how to figure out the labor certification. We just don't know. Like one suggestion we had made is that there would be another entity that would be responsible for that part. So we didn't have that issue.
So Lisa,
data, to look at the data and see if we're going to meet, if that's the right target, if the data do bear out that we are going to meet that target and not have to pay, the alternative compliance payments, that type of thing. If we can do the study on the front end, we just thought it would help inform us again. Up to the General Assembly, what you think the best way to go is.
I'm not asking trick questions, but so with regards to labor, the people that currently install thermal, would they then not be able to install geothermal because of the requirements of the bill? Is that what you're saying?
So I don't know if anyone can install. I don't know if anyone's talked to, BG&E Home or any of these. I really don't know who in Maryland. The others on the call may be better able to speak to that. I'm not aware if there aren't people.
So my installers are basically well diggers. Well, most of them are well companies and plumbing companies. So the existing well operators or the well diggers and the plumbing contractors. Are there provisions in this that would possibly prevent them from doing any of these jobs?
That is a good question. I don't know the answer to that. We can get back to you.
Rick, you want to answer that? Because
good question, Delegate. No, there aren't any provisions that would prevent those folks from working on these projects at all.
I would think they would still have to meet all the requirements that are listed out, and we would have to determine if they were qualified or not.
Thank you. That's a sideways way of saying, Johnny, they would have to meet all the requirements in the bill, and then they could do the install.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Okay, Delegate Queen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm just going to offer something as a suggestion, maybe so we can move forward on this, because I've heard a lot of the comments, and I do want to reiterate the work that the sponsor has done is incredible. As Delegate Dumais mentioned, you know, bringing labor and environmentalists together and working out a lot of this is something we don't want to lose. But could we have maybe an approach where, you know, however you want to do it, call it an implementation plan or implementation in 2 phases, where you put something on the front end similar to what we call the study, but maybe we call it the implementation plan for PSC, because we need to move PSC towards getting someplace. And I don't want to lose all this effort that's done, but have that be done, I don't know, 6 months, a year, whatever it takes. And then the implementation plan is what's in 107. So after they finish the implementation plan, then we move these years back or whatever to implement what's in 107, provided there are no changes. Because we're going to go back and forth, and I'm not sure we're going to get to any kind of conclusion today. But
yeah.
I feel, you know, there's a lot of work that's done. I don't want to lose that, but I do want to listen to PSC. If they're not ready, or they're not ready yet, or they can't do it yet, I don't think that's reasonable from my perspective, to me, to force this on them without them having some chance to look at it. But I don't want to lose what has been done with labor and environmental.
Yeah.
Is that an approach?
Oh, okay, thanks, yeah. I think, on council, how many amendments did you say we've had on this bill?
There's one. Council, you're muted.
He's muted, okay.
There's one amendment.
One amendment, okay. I thought there was some.
No, that's a different bill that has several. This had one amendment, and then there was a request this morning to make one slight tweak to it, but I haven't seen that turned around.
Okay. Because I was going to suggest that perhaps what we could do a reprint and just send that out to everybody, and then perhaps we can come back and we have another subcommittee meeting and just go ahead and at least see what it looks like with all the amendments.
Okay, I have the reprint with the current amendments. I guess if Delegate Trakoudian wants me to put the other requested change in, I can do that and then send it around, but that's up to you, Mr. Chairman, what you want me to do.
Okay. All right, the last amendment you got, you said with this morning, and that's what we just went over?
That's it. It was one small change dealing with what the Department of Labor would be doing as opposed to PSC concerning labor standards.
I
Chair,
see.
if I could.
Okay.
So,
yes, go ahead, Delegate Trakoudian.
Yeah, so there's the one amendment that I think we've all had for quite a while. So there's really no changes to this markup, just from a technical perspective. There's no changes to this markup that we've been looking at for, I guess, a week and a half now. When PSC said they wanted to make sure that it didn't end up being them who promulgate the regulations related to the labor standards, I had offered to just make it clear. So we were just literally adding the language that said by Department of Labor to address the concern that PSC has been raising. So that's really the change. So it's really that small. So it doesn't really change anything substantively in the bill, but it does clarify that PSC wouldn't be stuck with that piece. And Mr. Chair, can I just make another suggestion, or?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. I actually want to see if the subcommittee would be willing to accept the amendments and move the bill. I think that the PSC has raised some concerns that we've spent a lot of time in conversation with them. I agree that this would require some work on the part of their staff. I mean, any change to the RPS, any change to anything we do requires that agencies then have to implement the bill. But with all due respect to the PSC, we set the laws and then they figure out what to do with them. And so we definitely want to consider their perspective all the time, anytime we're making any changes. But what they're raising is not something that is a technical point about our electric grid that we're going to set things on fire. They're not raising a point about a violation of somehow being inconsistent with PJM rules. What they're saying is there's a lot of work that would come along with figuring out how to register these systems, and we haven't done that yet. What they're saying is we're worried that people might challenge the way that we choose to implement the low income component of this. People might challenge the way that we respond to the labor component. And so with all due respect, people challenge things all the time in front of the PSC. And every agency has to do some work after we pass legislation in this state. And I think this is a really good bill. I think that we have a lot of agreement around it. Could it be better? Probably. But I just think it would be a real shame for us to lose this opportunity. To Delegate DeMay's point, and even to Delegate Queen's point, I appreciate that she's concerned about the PSC's implementation, but you know what this bill really represents and what it represents as a model for good legislation, equity, all of those things in here, and something that will benefit based on all the analysis done by the Geothermal Association, the entire state, the rural areas, the well drillers in the rural areas, you know, who are able to shift to doing this when the well drilling dries up, you know, all of that sort of thing. It really has this broad support. And so I'd actually like to move the amendments and see if this subcommittee would be willing to move the bill.
Okay, I've got, let me recognize the other two hands and then we'll come back to that, Delegate. Delegate Branch? You're muted.
Yeah. I just kind of want to add to that. I think everybody's done great work on this, but at the same time, PSC has always been a partner, and we've always worked with them since I've been here. I mean, since I've been on the committee, at least, they've always been a very, very strong component to things that we do as it relates to energy. So I'm not understanding why we want to force something on them right now. I would hope that everybody could, at some point next day or so, at least try to meet and talk and figure out what the problem is, so we can move it forward. But I think that everybody has legitimate concerns. I like the bill. Everybody wants to pass their own bill, so I understand Delegate Charkoudian's tenacity for moving it forward. But at the same time, I think we all got to work as a unit to make sure that this works. People and livelihood and jobs will depend on this, based on what I'm hearing. And there's supposedly, from what I'm hearing from my friend Rick, there's some pretty good jobs in the mix. So we don't want to blow that. We don't want to lose that. But at the same time, the unit has to work. So I don't know how you guys can come to the table and talk about it, but somebody should be talking to somebody to make sure that we don't drop the ball on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure, Delegate. Lisa Smith?
Yeah, thank you so much. And my hand was just up for a more specific point. And thank you, Delegate Branch, for that, because we certainly just want to make sure the policy intent is carried out and do our jobs implementing and watch out for the ratepayer impact. So I appreciate that. But I really just wanted to point out that the labor amendment that was referred to, I let everyone know, just to clarify, I don't think that there's no amendment to the actual section that we had a concern with. So that's still an outstanding issue.
It's within the study, as I recall, as opposed to the substantive provisions of the bill, as I read the amendment.
Okay. Delegate Charkoudian?
Sure, I just wanted to make sure Delegate Branch knows we actually have, I absolutely agree with everything you're saying. And we have been talking to the PSC multiple times over the last several weeks. And that's what I was saying. I believe we've addressed the majority of their issues. And then what it comes down to is that, you know, the bottom line is it is going to be more work for them. I'm happy to continue to talk to them. We have been, and we will continue. And there's a meeting, in fact, tomorrow with the engineers from the Geothermal Association and the engineers from the Public Service Commission, so that the geothermal folks can explain how the commercial systems are, registered in other states, and the PSC has a chance to learn from that. I think, it's all happening. I think it's just that we have a time crunch now. I'm confident that the PSC can figure out what to do with this, and that, we're working with them to make sure that they know how to do it, and including, setting up these engineer meetings and other things. So I'm not suggesting we have to talk to them. I just am suggesting that we can move forward because we know that we are talking to them.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, and if I may make a suggestion, or actually a question for the bill sponsor, the amendment she has, the tweak to the amendments goes in and talks about within the work group that would be convened, talks about examining methods instead of ensuring that the installers adhere to labor and apprentice programs, would say examine methods by which DOL shall require the geothermal installers adhere. And so I understand that would be part of the work group's charge. I think the concern that's being expressed otherwise is that in the body of the bill, where it talks about for the larger geothermal capacity systems, that the company has to provide these various labor protections and benefits. Perhaps it would be appropriate to add a third item clarifying there that the Department of Labor is the one that is responsible for enforcing those provisions. I don't know if that gets people off the dime or not, but that would seem to be addressing the current concern. But of course I would defer, of course, to the bill sponsor and to the subcommittee.
Yeah, that would be fine with me. I think it's a good idea.
Based on what I said, you can go off.
Okay. All right. All right. Anybody else? Okay. All right. I just think really there's still some things that that we probably need to iron out on the bill. So let's go ahead and hold this for another. And then we'll come back and maybe we can address those few concerns that we have left on the table, and then we're going to convene again and then see if we can't get this on through.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, would you want me to take the reprint
Yes.
that Delegate Charkoudian has referred to, add the language that was requested this morning and the additional language that I just proffered, and then
Right.
circulate that?
Circulate that, right.
I'll first send it to you and Delegate Charkoudian, but then if it's okay
Okay.
with everybody, then circulate it more broadly.
Okay.
But Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, yes, go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Is this something, Bob, you think that we may be able to get done sooner rather than later?
Yes.
If so, I was hoping maybe if we get a break tomorrow, hopefully we'll get a break tomorrow. Is it something we could reconvene for a few minutes and take that up?
I'll have this off my desk while you're in session for second session today, unless people ask too many questions on my bills.
Yeah, well, don't worry. If they do, I'll be the one answering those questions.
I understand. No,
Yeah,
I'll send it around this afternoon. So sure.
Okay. All right. Yeah. If we get a break, I'd like to see if we could get back together, Mr. Chairman, and take this up tomorrow.
Yeah, there are no bill hearings tomorrow, so only a subcommittee meeting that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Okay. All righty.
So held and circulate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 40 would be the same actually, because it's the same subject.
Same subject matter.
It's already included in 1007.
Mhm.
So that leaves 379. I think we're coming up pretty close on, if I recall correctly, the Republican caucus is meeting at 4.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well,
Yeah, Bob, you're right.
Well, what we can do, we can take up 379 tomorrow too.
I did send the reprint around with the consolidated amendments.
Right.
So,
Mr. Chair, can we just check to see if there's concerns about it? Because I think it may be ready to move. The only concern was that there were multiple amendments and now it's been all together.
Okay.
Let me see. Just trying which one this was. 383, 197, and new share, and this is the combined amendments. Amendment number 1 is technical. Okay, the amendments bring in the Empower Maryland statute and require that the commission will report on, for limited income Empower programs, disaggregated information, as well as the amount of funding that DHCD receives. The next section, we're talking about defining various programs, low income residential, talks about the 21 to 23 program cycle, which is the current one. DHCD shall procure or provide certain conservation services. And talking about incremental gross energy savings for those provisions, funded through Empower surcharge or USDOE. Additional amendments, lifetime plan, the energy efficiency plans and demand reduction plans have to include average lifetime measure thresholds, make sure that we're actually getting our money over time in a cost-effective way. And then again, requiring DHCD to report to PSC on that information, which they then turn around for the General Assembly on limited income Empower programs, and with some additional intent language saying that when as and if the Empower targets are reauthorized for another 3-year cycle, that they will increase the incremental gross energy savings that would be required for those limited income programs. And you also are establishing a green and healthy task force. Those are the only changes there are that you're taking out Department of Health and putting in People's Council on the work group or task force. And again, you've taken out the material here, the CEF and AltaGas merger language. So that was the reprint that I circulated last week.
Oh, okay. All right.
Can I move the amendment?
Yes, you can, on the amendment. Okay, on the amendment, can I get a motion on that?
There's a motion, we just need a second.
Okay, can I get a second on the amendment?
I'll second it.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved and second on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Most of the members are muted, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, would everybody unmute, please? All those in favor of the amendment, would you signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, say nay.
I move the
Okay,
bill as amended.
okay. All right, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, would you signify by saying aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good.
Opposed.
Mr. Chairman, is this 379 we're doing?
Correct.
Yes, it's 379, yes. Okay. Okay. All right. Bob, were you able to get a count on the folks that, on the favorables and the opposed on that? Or do we need to get a?
No, I do not have any clue as to what happened with the
All right.
motion.
Okay.
I can tell you
Okay.
what happened.
This is on the
Favorable.
on the favorable. All those in favor, well, maybe we can do a roll call to make sure we get everybody.
Okay, so Delegate Branch,
I'm a pass. Because I don't understand the bill, really. I was confused at what bill we were even on.
okay.
I thought we were holding this one to the next meeting.
Yeah, I don't know why we're rushing.
Yeah.
I don't know
I
what-
thought,
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
was-
passing the amendment is one thing, but passing the bill is another step. I don't think.
I'm not
we were
ready. I'm
expecting.
not ready to do that.
Okay.
We should
I think we're requesting a hold then.
Oh,
Are we requesting a hold?
all right. Are we requesting a hold on the bill then, y'all? Hold on.
I'm good with that.
Why
I'm
don't
good.
let's just since everybody doesn't quite understand what the bill does, we'll just hold this until tomorrow and we'll vote on it then.
We'll vote it tomorrow.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
All right.
so that I think has already been circulated. So I'll circulate a reprint on 10:07 with the changes. And that would be the agenda for tomorrow.
Okay. So it'll be 1007 and
And 379,
379.
397,
Okay.
379. Yep.
379. Okay. All right. All right. If there's anything else, if there's nothing else for the order, we'll reconvene and see everybody on tomorrow.